So I went through and I did 2 internship rotations. Yep, 2 internship rotations at John Deere, which I'll make another video about working there, because that was an experience. But I didn't buy a single tool from any of those guys. Now, fast forward to my next internship, where I worked at a proper power sports dealership. We had Yamaha, Honda, Polaris, and also we did Stihl and Husqvarna chainsaws, trimmers, you know, that kind of stuff. Not like Husqvarna dirt bikes or anything like that, like the Husqvarna, you know, saws and trimmers and, you know, that kind of stuff. So, you know, the thing that I actually thought I was supposed to be doing, or had planned on doing because I was going to school for it, I got an internship working there. Only one tool truck that showed up at that shop, and he showed up every single week. At John Deere, all those guys showed up maybe once every other week. Most of them, it was like once a month. So, you know, when I started working at this other shop, and the Snap-on guy showed up every week on whatever day it was, Wednesday or Thursday, whatever day it was, every week within like a 1 hour window. It's like schedule, on time, every week. And no other truck ever showed up. It was always just a Snap-on truck. And I learned why fairly quickly. Is my shop manager at this shop told me this whole long story, and basically his whole deal was he'd been turning wrenches for a living his entire life and been doing it like 30 years, doing this crap his whole life. He had basically run off all of the other tool guys from bothering to come to the shop, because our Snap-on guy, who his name was Brian, I still to this day could tell you his name. I don't remember his phone number, but I had it memorized. I knew Brian. We all knew Brian well because we saw Brian every week, and we spent time on that truck. It was not quick little trips like had been my experience up until that point, where it's like, hey man, can you fix this tool? Cool, bye. It was like a minute. No, we spent time on the truck with Brian. So we knew Brian. And Brian was actually a customer of ours too. He would come and he had like a 70s Goldwing that was in pristine condition. It was like a collector's bike. And he brought it to us to have it serviced and maintained and stuff. It was in just perfect condition, man. It was pretty cool to see such an old bike still in such good shape and, you know, being used. So you don't see a whole lot of those that are in good shape. You know, if you see them at all, you know, they're just completely ruined, run down, degraded to nothingness, if you see them at all. So I learned though that Brian was the only guy that showed up. He came every week, same day, virtually the same time, and one of the first things that they told me about, like, oh yeah, you know, you work here, you get a tool allowance. And I was like, what's a tool allowance? Dealership owner, the guy that owned the dealership, if you worked in the shop there, you got a tool allowance. He paid, and basically the way it worked was he just paid Brian, I think it was $100 a month, just straight to Brian. Each one of us paid $100 to Brian to pay off our account with Brian. So it encouraged us to keep an account with Brian, rather than buy a tool outright. It's like, oh, whatever the minimum payment is on an account, and if you don't know what an account is, it's credit. It's like, oh, I buy a tool that costs, I don't know, $1,000, let's say, and it would be in tiers, just like anything, just like having a credit card, except there's no interest. At least I don't think there was interest. Maybe there was interest. I don't remember. But either way, let's say it was $1,000 that you owed on your account. Well, that meant that it costs you $35 a week. And so Brian showed up every week to get his payment out of every one of us. So I'm pretty sure I cost $39. I made sure that my account was low enough that it was $35 a week is what I owed him, I'm pretty sure. And I wrote him a check every week for $35. But then I'm pretty sure it was $100 once a month. The guy that owned the dealership would go out to the truck either the first or last week of the month, and he'd write him a check for, there were 3 of us that worked in the shop, so say $300, and it was $100 to each one of our accounts. But I think there was a shop account too that had some stuff on there, but whatever it was. But I made sure that I kept my account balance with Brian as low as I could keep it reasonably. Like, I would buy a tool, and that would be my account until I paid Brian off, and then I would buy another tool. So that is not normal, and that's probably not what I would do now if I was turning wrenches for a living now. I'm not, thank goodness, because that'd be so expensive. Because I turned into a tool snob real quick working at this shop, but for good reason. So one of the first things that they told you at this shop, which I didn't have an issue because I had all my tools were Snap-on tools, but walked into the shop first day, shop manager came back and he said, what kind of tools do you have, or show me your tools, something like that. And I showed him my Snap-on set that was basically pristine because I hadn't used them very much aside from working on lawnmowers, so they'd gotten kind of nasty, but I was taking good care of them, and realistically hadn't used them that much, if we're being honest. And he goes straight to my screwdrivers and goes, if you do not have a Snap-on set of screwdrivers that you're using in this shop, you cannot work in this shop. And I said, okay. And I didn't question it. I just said, okay, well, I'm good because I have Snap-on screwdrivers, obviously. And on I go. Well, what I learned later was that the reason for that is, I've had people argue this point. I've seen it true. A Snap-on screwdriver will take out a screw that another screwdriver would strip. It would strip that screw out because the screw is so tight that Snap-on screwdriver would take it out that some other screwdriver would strip out. And beyond that, There are a lot of stripped out screws that I have personally taken out with a snap-on screwdriver that some other screwdriver had stripped bad enough to the point where they gave up on it. They stripped it out and that was the end of it. Put my snap-on screwdriver on there, cracked it right off open. Now, that's not to say that if you got a stripped out screw that you just need to get a snap-on screwdriver and it'll just, you know, pop it right open. That is not always the case. But I have seen it happen. I have done it personally myself many times. And you know, if you grab, you know, a snap-on screwdriver, and you grab, I don't know, not picking on Craftsman, but let's say you pick up a Craftsman screwdriver, you compare them, you'll see there's two pretty major differences in just the bit on its own. One being that the precision of the actual head of the bit and how it actually goes into the head of the screw and how it fills out like a Phillips head screw is significantly better. Like, it is a properly sized, whereas something like a cheaper screwdriver bit is kind of small. Like, it doesn't fit right. That's all I know how to explain it. The other thing is that on the sides of that bit, there's grooves cut in it perpendicular to the grooves of the bit. Those things bite into the walls of the inside of the screw head channels, and it grabs and holds onto that crap. There's been screws that I've had on my snap-on screwdriver that rather than they've been so tight that I physically couldn't turn it. I didn't have enough strength to turn it and pop it loose, but it wouldn't strip it out. Like, I was the weak point. The screwdriver wasn't the weak point and allowed it to slip. I was the weak point because I couldn't turn it. It's pretty crazy when you're not used to that. I don't know if that's Snap-on's slogan anymore, but it was when I was turning wrenches for a living. Was, you know, Snap-on, and I've got cases that say this, you know, it's Snap-on. There is a difference. And there is a difference, man. I am telling you, there is a difference.